I just heard Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto uh, number 2 in C minor, opus 18. I think today was one of those times where I heard and listened to a piano concerto, like, or a symphonic piece, musical piece. Meaning, I heard what the composer was trying to tell, the journey they were taking, and what they do, and kind of anticipated what they're going to do, and was really satisfied. So I felt like I was going through a story this time, and I think this is my detailed analysis on how I listen to a symphonic piece, and how I interpret it and enjoy it. So I start off with a little background information on what this concerto is about. The concerto is about Rachmaninoff's mental turmoil, and the concerto is dedicated to Rachmaninoff's therapist. The concerto talks about how Rachmaninoff felt and how he was transformed in a way by the therapist. Hence, it's dedicated to the therapist or the counselor. And Rachmaninoff in this piece is described, at least in the first movement, is described by the piano, and the therapist is depicted by the strings, the strings in this piece. So this is like some basic information that is useful for us to understand the story and how it goes, or rather than the story, how Rachmaninoff makes this piece, and how the music works in this piece. So this music starts with a very somewhat of a very explorative and highly moving as in terms like a very rapidly changing and kind of a little chaotic, but it's not really chaos, as in it's not random. The underlying movement of the piano is on a single melody, but then if you were to hear it isolated, you wouldn't be able to recognize it. So what happens is the piano is accompanied by the strings. Now the strings tell you exactly what melody is under. So how I understand this is, as Rachmaninoff has a correct melody, has a singular melody, but then Rachmaninoff expresses it, or goes about it in a very chaotic manner. The underlying melody is something that the piano does not recognize. It follows it, but the piano is not purely on that underlying melody, I could say. But the strings, the warm strings that surround the piano, is very singular and correct, and it reflects what the actual underlying melody is underneath this. So this kind of depicts how Rachmaninoff's center was on a correct melody, on a melody, I guess. But then Rachmaninoff's going through this turmoil, and the piano isn't able to really. It's really hard to make out what the melody is from that. But the strings guides it, and it expresses its and lets the world know, and lets us know what is actually happening, and what Rachmaninoff is actually trying to say. So in a way, the strings helps Rachmaninoff tell what the real melody is, just like how the therapist tried to tell the therapist helped Rachmaninoff express what is happening, and what he felt, I guess. So we start with a melody, and then that melody is how do I say? Yeah, that melody is built up, and then we also introduce another melody. Then we release the first melody, and we release the second introduced melody in the first moment. So that's how that works. The second time, like as we progress through each movement and actually each melodies or each ideas, the piano gets more and more stable until the third movement, where it's very strong and and it's very on point, and Yeah. Um, cool. And in each movement, how we listen to it is an idea is adopted, and then it's uh, it's built up, it's introduced at a point, and then it's built up and built up until it's released and expressed and it's glory. Maybe even actually two ideas, you could say. Yeah, one like main idea, and sometimes there's another idea that like contrasts it, and uh, it gives you something that these two melodies can play. It's like you could say, yeah, kind of characters or something, like how the first character and second character interact, and like supporting character, I would say. Yeah, supporting character evolves, and then supporting character has a release, and the main character then has a release. In each movement this happens. So yeah, the excitement, or the cool thing about all this is obviously, yeah, the characters themselves are very or the ideas themselves are very well written, like beautiful, and each climax the character gets is very is amazing. Like you feel so euphoric, and it's cool. But also the journey that these ideas take, like how they move from pianos, and the melodies they go on, and how they explore their space, and then they gradually build up upon to the climax is actually uh, what Rachmaninoff or any composer is very it's the geniusness of them. How One way to look at it is how creatively they can go from here to the climax, and give you a sense of satisfaction and like happiness, and like, oh my gosh, Rachmaninoff did that so well in the first concerto, sorry, the first movement. And yeah, the second movement, I think he intentionally left a little bit of unsatisfaction. In the third movement, obviously it was satisfactorily uh, finished and like done. Yeah, and then the fade out happens, okay, I guess. So yeah, the journey itself, like that these individual ideas take, and then they evolve and they release, is super cool. One way to look at it is how explorative these ideas are, and the journeys they take, and how engaging yet that these ideas are, that the listener still wants to know, okay, fine, am I going to get to the, and that happened multiple times. Often Rachmaninoff, what he would do is just before the climax, what would happen is Rachmaninoff would kind of hint you on what the climax is, like give you a few ideas, and that happens a lot, like hint you a few ideas, but then go back to exploring a little more. And yeah, this kind of a build up kind of thing, it's engaging, and each time you're like, okay, fine, am I gonna get the climax right now? But then Rachmaninoff goes into do something else, and then you go like, okay, fine, I've built it up, can I get the climax now? But then Rachmaninoff again tries to do something else. Sometimes at least in the third moment, how I felt was it kind of felt like I was going to hear I mean, I guess this is not how symphonic pieces work, but it kind of felt like I was going to hear the first idea that we heard again, or at least, I don't know, maybe I wanted a circular arc like that. I thought I was going to hear the first movement idea, like the build up was such a way, but then it was a new idea. That idea was given, and that idea was released. And even after the idea was released, I thought this is not how, I guess this is not how symphonic pieces work. I thought the idea would finish, and I would hear the first ideas, like a new climax for the first idea again, which I thought is a pretty cool idea. Not yeah, but that didn't happen. Obviously, it just faded out. Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. There was an interesting kind of a piano galloping thing that was really cool. Like in the third movement, yeah. Um, yeah, that was really interesting. Uh, yeah, it felt very visual in a way, like yeah, like interesting. It was kind of this, yeah, visuals I got about a horse galloping, and something that felt like that at least. But one thing that I wanted to say was, often, at least when sometimes how symphonies are depicted to me, or like orchestral pieces are depicted to me, is that they said that each music has this, there's a visual that's happening, and like, you're supposed to find out what the visual is and something like that. But I guess that's not true. Like, a symphony or a musical piece is an isolated piece on its own. So underlyingly, you have a story. A visual medium would use visual means to tell you how a story, like, or characters evolve and something like that. But in music, again, you have a story, something like a character, which is the parallel of an idea, I guess. And you explore these ideas, right? These musical ideas, these tunes, and how they evolve and go on and go through their journey. So it's you parallel it, but then yeah, it's not necessary that when I hear a symphonic piece, I'm supposed to have a visual of character, like in the character is trying to say something. Rather, it's more like a very, yeah, it's just this. It's just music, where like you have a home or something like that. If you want to say, you have a central idea, and then you evolve, you take a journey, and then you get a climax for that idea. Yeah, and it should be just seen that way. You're not supposed to really think like, oh, there's a visual for this, for like the first movement. There's this visual of this person going or something like that. I don't think that's the way you should go about it. Or at least that's not the way that I want to go about. I found it a little contradictory when I went in that direction and tried to okay, what is this place, and what is the visual that this music is giving me. It's kind of like saying, like going to a watching just a film, like an isolated film, visual film, and being like, okay, what is the music that's going to happen, like that's happening on the background or something like that, of the character. It's not what the visual like medium is trying to do. It's like not the point of the visual medium. The point of the visual medium is how in visual space the characters move, and they get a rise, they get an introduction, they get an development, and then they have an exposition or a climax. Similarly, in music, you have a audio character or an audio idea or a phrase. You have a development, and then you have an exposition, or a climax. So yeah, we should. So in the music medium, I think this is what we're supposed to go about. What else? Yeah, I think this is a good framework on how I could approach listening to symphonies and like symphonic pieces and music. Anything that I wanted to mention? Just as an annexure, I guess, like film, as in movies, I guess they have both. They have the exploration of a single story in multiple mediums, in a visual medium, where like just an isolated visuals, you can see how the character evolves, and in a musical medium. I guess visual medium really, it's visual plus the dialogue in a way. So yeah, I would consider the dialogue part of the visual medium, like how just the visual medium conveys the story, and the musical medium is the same story. So the heart and the core is still the same. This is the core of the story is still the same, but then you explore it in the musical medium. That's kind of cool. How you can have a visual, like you can have the same story and that can be narrated simultaneously, or actually in different ways. Different ways give you more interesting ideas, but they're parallelly, or not exactly parallelly, but like, yeah, you have a visual medium and you also have an audio medium annexed to it, but it's narrated in the visual medium in a way, and then the audio medium in a way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be simultaneous. Like the visual medium and the audio medium does not have to simultaneously go about through the story. There can be points where like the visual medium is going away, but then the audio medium gives you a hint of what is going to happen in the story. So you have a central story, right? Okay, this is what you work. This is what both the music and the video go through. And let's say the story and the time like axis is like intertwined. You have a visual medium that tells the same story, or like projects the same story on uh, like in a certain way. And then you have the music medium which also projects the same story, or like, okay, I guess the projection of the music medium is on the, I don't know, it's more like the eigen, wow, okay, it's more like the eigen vector, or like the eigen line. The basis is like the story, and the music and the visuals are like in two different dimensions. When you project it, when you find the eigenvectors of these, I guess they will be on the, like, they'll be the story themselves, like it'll be the story itself. But as independent things, they evolve, and sometimes the music can tell you what's ahead, like it can go a little ahead and like come back. It can take like something like that. So the visual audio medium can be like, okay, fine, I'm going to take a piece, like a hint of what's going to happen in the future, put it in the past, or like, as when the visual medium is still here, and like give you a hint and then go on. It can take multiple directions, the multiple way of multiple ways of going about it, multiple ways of narrating it. And I guess even the audio or the visual medium also does that. But an interesting thing is the audio medium is somehow also connected to the visual in a way, in a film at least. In a way, it is it can't just independently tell a story either. I mean, I guess that will be a very experimental approach. Can't, what I mean is, it's not the convention of how it's done, but in a way it kind of is backing the visuals, right? So it can't just tell the story on its own time, and like, on its own hit points, or like, climaxes. It kind of has to coincide with where the visual is on the story. So what I'm imagining right now is we project the visuals on the story axis, right? And that creates a new line. And the audio medium kind of has to be linked to this. Like the projection of the audio medium onto the story should also be linked to this, but it doesn't have to. Like sometimes it can go in front and back, and like, add elements and then proceed and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a very mathematical way of film composing. I like it. That's interesting. Cool. Interesting.